So Claire Skillen joins us. Thank you so much for being part of our Fireside chats. We're excited to get to know you better.
Thanks, Melissa. Happy to be here.
Now, I have to address the background because I was like, oh, that just brought so much peace when Claire connected. And then you were saying this is your picture on a hike you took, right?
Mhm.
Oh, and where is that, if you don't mind me asking?
It's at the top of a mountain on Vancouver Island where I'm from, and it's called 5040. So it's called 5040 because it's 5,040 feet up. And this is a picture from the Alpine hut at sunsets, and so there's just mountains for miles.
Oh, it's just so
Uh,
beautiful. So thank you for bringing that piece into this conversation because I'll just be staring at that. So let's talk a little bit about your background. I usually start with that because I find that
sure.
everybody has a
Yeah.
unique path that brought them here. So, what did you go to school for? Is it what you're doing now? And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I have a fairly eclectic background, so I'll do my best to keep it brief, but if I'm carrying on like it's a month of Sundays, let me know. My I have a Bachelor of Science in Physical Geography, and that included a specialization in climate studies and wastewater treatment processes as a minor through environmental studies. Am I working in that area now? No, and that's the interesting thing and something that is really important to note because what you start off doing is not necessarily what you're going to finish up doing,
Mhm.
and that there's many iterations of careers or can be throughout your working life. So I have that Bachelor of Science. I also have a master's in business and a certificate in HR, and I'm in progress and counting down the months, let me tell you, because school, as well as a privilege and is lovely, it's also a little tiring, especially when you have to write papers. But I am finishing a master's of counseling psychology now,
Oh,
and I
congratulations.
intend to focus on trauma and crisis intervention. I've spent the past 10 years or so working in tech, and I'm very much a fan of looking at systems and root cause. And I think, trauma really is kind of at the root of a lot of things. And,
Mhm.
it's a real opportunity to collaborate with people on their healing journeys and help them live the best version of their life that they can,
I love
through
that.
through that healing. So I figured that's a pretty good way to spend some time.
Well, I like how you connected the two because I think we're becoming aware about the effects of trauma and how it runs deep, and you can't just put a band-aid on it, that
Absolutely.
you have to really kind of figure this out. And the same with systems, with technology. If they're, it's like our body and our machines are always telling us when something's wrong. And and if you take the time, you can really, really figure it out and allow that to not continue, right?
Yeah,
Instead of just like I said, putting a Band-Aid on it and then wondering, why is it still breaking down? I don't understand. Why is it still happening? So that sounds wonderful.
absolutely.
Well,
Yeah, and I have my own company, Seascape Solutions Inc., and I have had that for, wow, about 8 years now. And I've been consulting in tech for a little bit, and most recently, the past few years in IT change leadership. And there's actually quite a bit of overlap between counseling psychology and change leadership,
really?
interestingly enough. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, because when it comes down to it, when you're rolling out a new application, in this case, in the healthcare sector for my current project, it, there's it's really about people, people who are in a current state, they're used to certain things. What do they need to do now? How do we prepare people to adapt to a change? How do we support people through that process? And, really it's not so much about big, heavy change management plans these days because, nobody reads them. I mean, I might use one as a doorstop. Don't listen, pro sci. Sorry. But when it comes down to the people are what matter most. So how do you work with people to give them the information that they need, the supports that they need, the tools they need, and build the relationships that you need in order to facilitate that change so that the people impacted have the smoothest journey as possible, I think is probably the best way to describe it.
Well,
But
it's about
yeah.
information, it's about
Yeah,
resources, it's
absolutely.
about connection, right?
Connection is a really good word. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Well, and I think that, I mean, this may be a cheesy transition, but that's what Weisel is about, is connecting women with each other who are interested
Yeah.
in these career paths. Because, and let me ask you this, working in tech in particular, did you find that you were one of the few women doing it, or did you have other women that you were doing that journey with?
That's a really good question. And I think I started off my career in technology as a business analyst, and I came from a non-traditional background. I mean, I don't have a computer science degree, right? So here I was jumping on what a mentor of mine might call the bleeding edge of the learning curve, and sorting myself out and very much building the plane as it's flying, as it were, to build
Mhm.
up my knowledge. And I did find in sort of the role of the business analyst that there was probably about 35 to 40% women in those roles. But when you look over the cubicle divide at the developers area, you probably see far fewer women
Right.
in the coding section. So probably more like about 25% women in that. And then that number drops even more significantly when you look at cybersecurity, where I think there's maybe approximately 10% of people working in cybersecurity
Mhm.
are women, in fact. Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of a story. I don't have it in front of me because it just popped in my head, and I'm terrible with names and terrible with
Okay.
details. If I'm trying, but basically, it's the story, and anyone can look it up, of uh someone who was trying. It was in the running world. They were trying to break.
Hmm.
I don't know what it was, the 10-minute mile, the 5-minute mile, whatever it was, but somebody,
Yeah.
it had not been done. And so and they tried and tried. Now, as soon as somebody did it, then like 2 or 3 more did it within a matter of years. So again,
Yep.
it's this idea, "Oh, wait a second, it can be done." So, okay, I'm not as intimidated, or I believe that it can, you have more of a belief system that it will happen, and then you make it happen. So, I feel the same with women in technology, right? Like you said, you don't see it,
100%.
but yet women are now starting to do it. And again, for the purpose of this organization is, hey, look how many people are doing it, and that you can do it too. I mean, so to me, that's why, I am a broadcaster. So you talk about being on the bleeding edge. I tease that I'm not quite in the technology field, but I guess I am. So, everybody at Weisel says, yes, you're included. But I do think, again, that I have seen in so many areas that if you can picture it, if you can visualize it, then you can make it happen. And women seeing other women do this, I think, is the inspiration they need to make it happen for themselves.
100%. I couldn't agree more, Melissa. And, see it, be it, dream it, be it. And I was privileged to be part of a local conference here called Dream It, Be It, and it was for girls. And so it's sort of like junior high age up to maybe first year university age. And a lot of it, there's one section before they go off to their workshops, and then there's people like me who've had several spins around the sun, who are available to share some experience and also be a possibility and say, you can do this too. And so there's lots of different roles out there. There's entrepreneurs, and then there's people like me where they say they encourage you to write down a question that you encourage the girls to ask you. And mine was, ask me about nonlinear career paths.
Hmm.
And part of it is that a lot of young girls, I've noticed a theme. They feel like they have to have it all figured out by the time they graduate high school. And I'm a visual representation of, no, you don't.
Right.
What you're doing is you're picking a direction, and you might do that for a little while. And if you want to do it long term, that's great.
Right.
But if you want to change, you can also do that. And so my journey into STEM, or not to STEM, because I started off in STEM really in the S letter, really. And then I moved over into the tech side of things. There's a lot of skills that can bridge over from one profession to another. And I strongly encourage women to consider those. So, for example, somebody having worked purely in a policy environment, for example, is going to be excellent at business rules and process. Great. You know what? You'd be great at business analysis.
Mhm.
Exactly. Or somebody that's in policy, for example, or someone that's worked with people. Maybe they were um, an account manager or they ran a business. Uh, User design, somebody
Yeah.
that's worked with people, there's so many skills you can translate over into tech. And I think part of where people get stuck sometimes is they look at a profession and go, yikes, that seems hard, or, that doesn't sound like anything that I want to do. But when you reframe you've the skill sets based on the cool problems and challenges you get to tackle, then that I think kind of lights people up in a bit of a different way. So,
Well, it makes me
um,
think of, high school. It
yeah,
makes me think of physics. Like, physics class, some
yeah,
teachers make it so boring, but there's so many cool things you
yeah,
can do with physics, and there's so many experiments you can do, and there's so many ways to introduce the cool side of science to kids,
like,
but not everybody does that. So, to me, it's the same with professions, right? Like, "Ooh, that sounds either boring or intimidating, or I don't know if I can do that." But like you said, if you reframe it and find the cool part of it, "Oh, well, this is a part of that profession," then you're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I kinda wanna do that," right?
yeah, absolutely. So, a friend of mine has a startup company, and Alter Ego Health, and she's working on, I think she's working on app development, but she's also like pulled together a series of services to help support women through menopause because, as you know, women are notoriously unsupported.
I'm there.
Oh yeah, got
I
the
have
memo.
arrived.
Yeah, well, I'm just beginning to get my memo, but here we are. There's no manual for this stuff,
Right.
right? So that's one example of a challenge you can solve. And then another one that really spoke to me was an app that students at UVic developed, which was that an app that described the number of spaces available for women in transition houses for women fleeing domestic abuse. And I flash back to a role when I was an employment and income assistance worker where I was that person who was phoning around trying to find a place for a woman knowing she couldn't go home.
Mhm.
What an amazing problem to solve,
Right. Well, and it
there's
goes
so
back
many,
to know
yeah,
yeah, it goes back to the know thyself, right? So
yeah,
I have a young son, and funny enough, I explain menopause as my second puberty. He understands what puberty is. So I'm like, "Well, I'm
that's
going through my
amazing.
second puberty."
That's a
And
great descriptor.
so that he's, I'm trying to just normalize feminine things for him, right? And he,
Yep,
as long as he understands it, then fine. Um, but it's about what are you interested in? So that's my guidance for him is like, look, because he knows that people go to college now and he knows like and I'm like, but you have to know you first. What's going to make
yeah,
you happy? And you can find a career or make a career out of that, right? So it goes back to what you said. Instead of it just being this STEM umbrella, that, it's like, well, what are you interested in? Well, how does your skill set, like you said, and your interests fit into these categories? And there's so many opportunities out there that you've probably never heard of that you would be a great fit for,
absolutely. And that's why networking is so important because when you have, women's organizations, like WISIS and, a number of local ones here, like Swiss and Island Women in Science and Technology or Women in Leadership, it really gives women the opportunity to learn from one another,
Mhm.
broaden the horizons a little bit around what's possible. Because as we talked about earlier, the see it, be it possibility becomes ever more present when you're networking in a room full of women
Yeah.
who maybe are already doing what you want to be doing or working in roles that you didn't even know existed that really kind of hit on the things that you enjoy doing as you talked about with your son, right?
Yeah.
So that power of networking and then also, you know, having that community side of things, because women in STEM, like life isn't 100% easy all the time in in that arena just yet. So it's the camaraderie that you get from networking and meeting other women in those areas where, there's maybe certain tips and tricks that you can get for
Mhm.
navigating that workspace is it's also really important too. And then with your networking, having the mindset especially once you've built up networks, as I'm sure, both of us have. It's who can I connect to help someone, is one of the things that I focus on too.
Well, I will say for students who are watching, the two things I want to address, and Claire, you let me know if you agree.
Sure.
Number one is that, yes, money is important, but I have found in my life that to do what you love, the money follows. If you're struggling doing something because you think it's the right thing to do and you're not having fun or you're not enjoying it and you're not going to put all your effort into it, the money's not going to be there. Right. And then the second thing, like you mentioned, the networking in my career, pretty much most of the jobs I've ever received are through people that I knew. It's not through job ads, it's not through, social media sites. The majority of my income has always come from networking. So I think that's an important thing too, to reiterate what you just said, that if you are that student who's panicking or like you said, trying to figure out my life, it's like, well, one step at a time. But if you want to earn money, then those two things are very important.
100%. I do agree, Melissa. And I would say a number of my opportunities have come through networking as well, like especially in the contract world. You hear about opportunities, you
Right.
apply, and I think that that key piece, especially for the students on the line, always keep working on knowing yourself. I mean, I'm in my mid 40s, and guess what? I'm still doing that. And I'd say I'm probably a bit more aligned now than I have been in the past, which is kind of a fun place to be because now I'm far more present to the things that make me feel strong in the process of doing it. And that's really what the strengths are all about. So that's Marcus Buckingham's concept of a strength is something that makes you feel strong in the process of doing it. And you can be really good at something, but if you find you need a really long nap afterwards, then you probably shouldn't be doing it as a full-time job
Right.
if you can help it.
Right. Exactly.
So
Well,
that self-discovery is important.
and I think that mentoring is always telling somebody it gets better. It always gets better. So I feel the need to say I'm in my 50s and I'm even more aware of my surroundings and my appreciations. And so I think for a woman, it age it gets better. You're mentally you get so much better, and emotionally you get so
Yeah.
much better. Except the menopause every now and again. But but you know what?
Yeah, well,
At least I know what it is. So when I feel like I'm losing my mind, then I know just give me 10 minutes, I'll be okay. So
yeah. Or maybe just because you got a bit of joint pain, you go sit in the sauna for half an hour if you can
right.
find one.
Exactly. So, yes,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful life if you make it that way. So, Claire Skillen, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure getting to know you. Now, if somebody's like, "Hey, I'd love to ask a couple more questions or want to reach out to you or find you," where would be the best place for them to go?
You're welcome to find me on LinkedIn, and I'm also happy to provide an email address for anybody that would be
Sure.
interested in connecting as well.
Claire, my friend, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, thank you for that picture. Hopefully, it'll inspire some of us to go hike there too.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Melissa. I appreciate it.